Have you ever walked past an old, abandoned building and felt like someone was watching you? That's the feeling I get every time I think about the old lifeguard tower on Blackwood Beach. It's a story that still sends a shiver down my spine, a local legend that feels a little too real. Blackwood Beach isn't your typical sunny paradise. The sand is more gray than gold, and the waves crash with a kind of heavy, somber rhythm. And for as long as anyone can remember, right there at the edge of the water stood the tower. It was made of sun-bleached wood, splintered and worn by years of salt and wind. A faded, almost unreadable sign hung crookedly from its side, declaring lifeguard off duty. No one had officially worked in that tower for decades. The local council had decommissioned it years ago, citing budget cuts and the beach's treacherous currents, which made it too dangerous for swimming anyway. It was just a relic, a ghost of a busier time. But here's where it gets strange. Every single night, without fail, a light would switch on inside the tower's small cabin. It wasn't a bright, modern light. It was a faint, warm, yellowish glow, like an old lantern was burning within. You could see it from the promenade that ran along the top of the dunes. Locals would point it out to tourists, whispering stories. The town's teenagers, always looking for a thrill, would dare each other to get closer. But no one ever did. There was an unspoken rule. You don't mess with the tower. The children of the town had their own versions of the story. They'd come running back from the beach, eyes wide with a mixture of fear and excitement. They'd swear on their lives that they saw a figure in the tower window. A silhouette, they said, standing perfectly still, just looking out at the ocean. Sometimes, they claimed, the figure would raise a hand, a slow, deliberate wave. Not a friendly hello, but something else. Something more like a warning or a farewell. Of course, the adults would dismiss it. It's just the light playing tricks, they'd say. An old reflection, a shadow from the moon. But even they couldn't explain the light itself. The town had cut the power lines to the tower years ago. There was no electricity running to it. So where was the light coming from? One particularly brave or perhaps foolish teenager, a kid named Leo, decided he was going to solve the mystery once and for all. He was a skeptic, always laughing at the ghost stories. He bragged to his friends that he would climb the tower, film whatever was inside, and prove it was all a hoax. So one evening, just as dusk was settling and that strange, familiar glow flickered to life, Leo and a small group of friends headed down to the beach. His friends stayed back on the dunes, filming with their phones, while Leo approached the tower. The ladder was rickety, and several rungs were missing. Salt had corroded the nails, holding it together. It looked incredibly unsafe. Leo hesitated for a moment, looking back at his friends. They were shouting encouragement, but their voices sounded thin and nervous in the salty air. He took a deep breath and started to climb. The oudwood groaned under his weight. He made it about halfway up when a sudden, fierce gust of wind slammed into the tower. It wasn't a normal sea breeze. It felt angry, personal. The entire structure swayed violently. From the dunes, his friends watched in horror. They said that for a split second, the light inside the tower flared up, becoming incredibly bright, illuminating the figure of a man standing inside. He was wearing an old-fashioned lifeguard uniform, and his face was completely blank, his eyes dark, empty pits. He raised a hand, not to wave, but with his palm facing out, as if to say, "Stop!" Leo screamed and scrambled back down the ladder, half falling the last few feet onto the sand. He ran back to his friends, pale and shaking, refusing to say what he saw. He never talked about the tower again. After that night, the legend only grew stronger. The tower wasn't just abandoned. It was occupied, guarded. People started digging into the town's history, looking for an explanation. They found old newspaper clippings from over 50 years ago. The articles told a tragic story. A young lifeguard, a man named Elias, had been on duty during a sudden, violent storm. A group of children had been caught in the rip current. Elias, without a moment's hesitation, dove into the churning water. He managed to push 3 of the children towards the shore, where others could help them, but he was pulled under by the powerful tide. They never found his body. He was declared a hero, but his watch had ended in tragedy. His last post was that very tower, Suddenly, the stories made a terrifying kind of sense. The light, the waving figure. It wasn't a ghost haunting the tower. It was a guardian. Elias was still on duty. He was still watching over the beach, waving children away from the dangerous water, keeping a silent, eternal vigil. The light wasn't a warning to stay away from the tower, but a warning to stay away from the sea. This new understanding changed how the town viewed the tower. It was no longer a place of fear, but one of somber respect, a monument to a hero who never left his post. The light continued to burn every night, a constant, comforting, yet eerie presence on the dark coastline. And then, one morning, everything changed. It was a calm, clear day. The sun was rising, casting a golden light over the beach, but something was wrong. The skyline was different. The tower was gone, not broken down, not washed away. It had simply vanished. There were no debris, no splintered wood, no marks in the sand where it had stood for almost a century. It was as if it had been plucked from reality, leaving no trace, not even a shadow. The only thing left behind, lying flat on the smooth, undisturbed sand where the base of the ladder should have been, was that old, faded sign. But the words on it had changed. It no longer said lifeguard off duty. In clear, crisp letters that looked freshly painted, the sign now read, "Thank you for swimming." No one knows what it means. Had Elias finally decided his watch was over? Was his spirit finally at peace? His duty fulfilled? Or was it something else entirely? A final message from the other side. The town has been debating it ever since. The beach feels empty now, and strangely, less safe without its ghostly guardian. The children don't play near the water anymore, and sometimes, when the fog rolls in thick and heavy from the sea, people say you can still see it, a faint, flickering light, far out over the waves, where no light should be. A silent beacon in the endless dark. It makes you wonder if the lifeguard is truly gone, or if he's just moved his watch. What do you think happened to the tower? Was it a ghost, a glitch in reality, or something else? Let me know your theories in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like and subscribe for more mysteries from the shadows. Thanks for watching. Have you ever felt a connection to the ocean? Something almost personal. Lena was on a much-needed vacation. Her little cottage perched right by the sea. For the first few nights, the sound of the waves was a soothing lullaby. A constant rhythm of crash and retreat. It was predictable, comforting. She'd fall asleep to the ocean's steady breathing, feeling the stress of her city life wash away with each tide. But then, on the fifth night, something shifted. Lena was sitting on her porch, wrapped in a blanket, watching the moon cast a silver path across the dark water. She noticed a change in the rhythm. It wasn't the usual, seamless flow. Instead, there was a distinct pause, a long-held breath. She leaned forward, listening intently. The wave pulled back, and then silence. She found herself counting in her head. 1, 2, 3, 4. Then crash. The wave finally broke on the shore. That was weird. She brushed it off as a strange anomaly, a trick of the wind. The next night, she was back on her porch, a cup of tea warming her hands. She couldn't help but listen for it again. And there it was. The long, silent pause. This time, she counted aloud. 1, 2, 2, 3. A young couple was walking hand in hand along the water's edge. Just two people. Then, a massive wave crashed ashore. Lena's heart skipped a beat. A coincidence, surely. At Toby. The following evening, a small family was building a sandcastle, their laughter echoing in the twilight. There were the parents and their 2 kids, plus an older gentleman walking his dog a little further down. 5 people in total. Lena held her breath as the tide pulled back. The silence stretched. She whispered the count. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And right on cue, the wave thundered onto the beach. This was no coincidence. A thrill, a mix of fear and wonder, ran through her. The ocean. It was counting. It was counting the people on its shore. Every night, the tide would pause, take a silent census, and then release its wave. The number of seconds matched the number of souls standing by its edge. Lena spent the rest of her vacation testing this bizarre, magical theory. A lone fisherman. One beat, then crash. A group of teenagers having a bonfire. 7 beats, then crash. It was always perfect, always precise. The ocean was aware. On her final night, Lena packed her bags, a sense of melancholy washing over her. She wasn't ready to leave this enchanted place. For one last time, she walked down to the water's edge, the sand cool beneath her bare feet. The beach was completely empty. It was just her and the vast, dark expanse of the sea. She stood there, watching the stars reflected in the water, feeling a profound sense of connection. The tide began to pull back for its final count. The silence descended, deeper and more profound than ever before. Lena closed her eyes and listened. She didn't count this time. She just waited. A long, stretching moment passed. Then she heard a soft, single beat, a gentle pulse from the deep, and then a final, soft wave lapped at her feet, as if saying goodbye. In that moment, she knew. The beat wasn't a count, it was an acknowledgement. A recognition. Tonight, the ocean had seen her, but as she stood there, a strange feeling crept over her. The sound had been different. It wasn't just one beat. She replayed it in her mind. It was a soft beat, followed by another, fainter one. 2 beats, but she was alone. Utterly alone. A shiver traced its way down her spine, a cold that had nothing to do with the night air. She slowly turned around, her gaze sweeping across the deserted beach, up the dunes towards the empty road. There was nothing. No one, just the wind and the rustling seagrass. But the feeling lingered, the feeling of not being alone. The ocean had counted too. She tried to reason with herself. Maybe it was an echo. Maybe a bird. But she knew, deep down, that wasn't it. The ocean's count had been unerringly accurate all week. It never made mistakes. So if it counted 2, there were 2. As she walked back to her cottage, the feeling of being watched intensified. She kept glancing over her shoulder, her heart pounding a frantic rhythm against her ribs. She locked the door, drew the curtains, but she couldn't shake the unease. The ocean knew a secret she didn't. There was someone else out there in the darkness with her. Or something. Lena never returned to that beach. The memory of the 2 beats haunted her. She'd look at the ocean and pictures or on TV and feel a familiar chill. She'd learned that some mysteries are best left unsolved. The sea keeps its secrets, and sometimes it shares just enough to let you know how small you truly are, and that you are never, ever truly alone. It makes you wonder, doesn't it? What do the waves count when they reach your shore? Thanks for listening, and don't forget to follow 4 more stories that will make you rethink the world around you. The air was still, heavy with the pre-dawn chill, and tasted of salt. I always loved this time of day, that quiet moment when the world holds its breath, waiting for the sun. The beach was my sanctuary, a wide expanse of pale sand stretching out to meet a sky just beginning to blush with color. I walked along the water's edge, the cool, damp sand firm beneath my bare feet. It was perfect, untouched. Not a single footprint marred the smooth canvas, except for the ones I was leaving behind me, a neat trail marking my solitary journey. The rhythmic sigh of the waves was the only sound, a gentle, hypnotic pulse. I felt a sense of peace wash over me, a feeling that I was the only person left in the world. It was a beautiful illusion. I walked for what felt like miles, lost in thought, watching the sun slowly climb above the horizon, painting the water in shimmering strokes of gold and orange. The light was incredible, turning the ordinary into something magical. Every shell, every piece of driftwood, seemed to glow from within. Finally, I decided it was time to head back. The hotel would be stirring to life soon, the smell of coffee and breakfast replacing the clean scent of the sea. I turned around, expecting to see my own lonely trail of footprints leading back the way I came. But what I saw made my heart stop. There, right beside my own prints, was another set. They were identical to mine in size and shape, a perfect mirror. But that wasn't the strangest part. They started from the exact spot where I had turned, as if someone had materialized out of thin air and begun walking beside me from that precise moment. I followed the dual tracks with my eyes. They ran parallel, step for step, stride for stride. It was uncanny. It felt like I was looking at an echo, a shadow given form. My first thought was that someone was playing a prank. Maybe a friend from the hotel had followed me, carefully stepping in time with my own pace. But that didn't make sense. The beach had been empty. I would have heard them, seen them. The silence had been absolute. I scanned the shoreline, a knot of unease tightening in my stomach. There was no one, just me, the gulls circling overhead, and the endless sea. I started walking back, my pace quicker now, my sense of peace completely shattered. I kept glancing down at the sand. The two sets of footprints continued, side by side, a silent, impossible companionship. My own steps were now hesitant, uncertain. The other set remained firm, confident. It was as if this invisible partner knew exactly where we were going. Who was walking with me, or what? The morning light, which had seemed so beautiful just moments before, now felt harsh, exposing. The shadows stretched long and thin, playing tricks on my eyes. Was that a figure in the distance, near the dunes? No, just a cluster of seagrass swaying in the breeze. My mind was racing, trying to find a logical explanation. Maybe the wind had created a strange pattern in the sand. No, these were too perfect, too deliberate. Each print was a clear, distinct impression. I tried to rationalize it. Perhaps I had walked this way before, earlier, and forgotten. But the tide was coming in. It would have washed away any older tracks, and that wouldn't explain why the second set started abruptly where I'd turned around. The sand behind that point was completely smooth, wiped clean as if by a giant hand. It defied all logic. The unease began to curdle into genuine fear. I felt watched. The vast emptiness of the beach no longer felt peaceful. It felt menacing. I imagined a presence just over my shoulder, just out of my line of sight. I fought the urge to break into a run, telling myself not to be ridiculous. It was just sand, just footprints. But my body didn't believe it. My skin prickled, and the hair on my arms stood on end. I focused on the hotel, a distant shape on the horizon. It seemed impossibly far away. With every step I took, the phantom beside me took one too. I tried to alter my stride, taking a longer step, then a shorter one. The other footprints matched me perfectly. It was like dancing with a ghost. I stopped dead in my tracks, my breath catching in my throat. I stood there for a long moment, listening. The waves crashed, the gulls cried. Nothing else. But he made a look down. The two sets of footprints stopped exactly where I stood. There were no prints leading away, no sign that anyone had been there at all, except for this impossible evidence in the sand. He took a deep, shuddering breath and looked behind me, back the way I had just come. My blood ran cold. The sand was smooth, completely, utterly smooth. The dual tracks, the ones I had been following with mounting dread for the last 10 minutes, were gone. It was as if they had never been there. The only footprints on the entire stretch of beach were the ones I was standing in right now. The sand behind me was as untouched as it had been when I first started my walk. I spun around, looking toward the hotel. My original, single set of prints was still there, leading away from me into the distance. But the path I had just walked back, the path with the two sets of prints, it was gone. It erased. I stood frozen, caught between a past that had been wiped clean and a future I was now terrified to walk into. Was I losing my mind? Had the solitude and the sunrise somehow triggered a hallucination? But it felt so real. The confusion, the fear that was real. I could still see the image of those parallel tracks burned into my memory. Slowly, cautiously, I took a single step forward. I held my breath and looked down. Just one set of prints. My own. I took another step. Again, just one. A wave of relief, so powerful it almost buckled my knees. wash it over me. It was over. Whatever it was gone. I didn't walk. I ran. I sprinted back toward the hotel, not daring to look behind me, my heart hammering against my ribs. I didn't stop until my feet hit the wooden boardwalk and the sounds of the waking world, the clatter of plates. The murmur of conversation enveloped me. I never told anyone what happened. Who would believe me? They'd say I was overtired, that my mind was playing tricks on me. Maybe they'd be right, but even now, years later, I can't shake the feeling of that morning. Sometimes, when I'm walking alone, I get the distinct and unnerving sensation that I'm not truly by myself, and I find myself glancing down, half expecting, half dreading, to see a second set of footprints falling into step right beside my own. The beach at sunrise is a beautiful place, but I've learned that some mysteries are best left undisturbed, and some paths are meant to be walked alone. Thanks for watching, and if you have any similar strange experiences, share them in the comments below. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more stories from the edge of reality. The beach was Emily's favorite place in the whole world. The way the salty air filled her lungs, the rhythmic crash of waves against the Shurit, was a symphony of calm. On one particular afternoon, as the sun began its slow descent, painting the sky in hues of orange and pink, she stumbled upon something special. Half buried in the damp sand was a spiral shell, its surface polished smooth by the tireless ocean, its colors shimmering with an pearlescent glow. It was perfect. Following an age-old tradition, Emily lifted the shell to her ear, expecting the familiar, muffled roar of the sea. Trapped within, and there it was, a gentle whoosh, the sound of distant waves. She smiled, a simple, pure joy. But when she lowered the shell, a frown creased her brow. The sound didn't stop. The whisper of the ocean continued, as if the shell itself was just an amplifier for a sound that was now coming from everywhere and nowhere, all at once. She shook her head, attributing it to the wind, or her imagination playing tricks. She tucked the beautiful shell into her pocket, its smooth surface cool against her fingers, and began the walk home, leaving the real ocean behind. As she walked, the phantom sound of the waves seemed to follow her, a soft, persistent echo in her ears. That evening, the house was quiet. Her parents were downstairs, watching television, their muffled laughter a distant comfort. Emily lay in her bed, the spiral shell placed carefully on her nightstand. The house was miles from the coast, yet the sound was undeniable. It wasn't a memory, it was real. The gentle lapping she'd heard on the beach had grown into the powerful, rhythmic crash of a high tide. It wasn't just in her ears anymore. It felt like it was filling the room, coming from the walls, from beneath her floorboards. She pulled her blanket tighter, her heart thumping a nervous rhythm against her ribs. The air even tasted salty. It was impossible. Utterly impossible. Yet it was happening. She tried to rationalize it, telling herself it was just a vivid dream taking hold before she was even fully asleep. But the sound was too clear, too present. She eventually drifted into an uneasy sleep, the roar of the ocean, her unsettling lullaby. The next morning, sunlight streamed through her window, and for a moment, everything felt normal. The house was silent again. She sat up, rubbing the sleep from her eyes. Her gaze fell to the nightstand. It was empty. The shell was gone. A knot of unease tightened in her stomach. She hadn't moved it. She was certain of that. She scanned her room, under the bed, behind the curtains, but it had vanished without a trace. Then she heard it, a soft, lapping sound. It was hintily much quieter than the crashing waves from the night before, but it was coming from just outside her bedroom door. Confused and a little scared, she swung her legs out of bed. Her feet, expecting the familiar feel of her plush carpet, landed in something cold and wet. She gasped, looking down. A thin layer of crystal-clear water covered her entire bedroom floor, shimmering in the morning light. Tiny, perfect ripples spread out from where her feet had landed. Slowly, she waded towards her door, the water sloshing softly around her ankles. Her mind raced, trying to find a logical explanation. A burst pipe, a freak rainstorm that flooded the second floor. Nothing made sense. She reached for the doorknob, her hand trembling slightly. and pulled the door open. The sight that greeted her made her breath catch in her throat. The hallway was gone. Her home was gone. Instead, her bedroom door opened directly onto a vast, sandy beach. The water that covered her floor was the edge of a turquoise ocean, its gentle tide lapping right at her doorstep. The sky was a brilliant, cloudless blue, and the sun felt warm on her skin. In the distance, she could see seagulls circling and hear their familiar calls, blending with the soft whisper of the waves. It was the most beautiful and the most terrifying thing she had ever seen. She stood frozen in her doorway, one foot in her waterlogged bedroom, the other on the warm, dry sand of this impossible shore. Where was she? Was this a dream? She pinched her arm hard. The sting of pain was sharp and real. This was happening. The shell hadn't just brought the sound of the ocean to her. It had brought the ocean itself. It had taken her home. For a long moment, she just stared, overwhelmed. Fear mingled with a strange sense of wonder. Her normal life, her family, her school day, were all on the other side of that door. A world away. Ahead of her was an endless expanse of sea and sand, a world born from a single, whispering shell. A gentle breeze rustled her pajamas, carrying the scent of salt and adventure. She took a deep breath. She didn't know how she got here, or how she would ever get back. But as she looked out at the sparkling water, a small, tentative smile touched her lips. She took a step out of her room, leaving her old world behind, and walked towards the waves. The shell was gone, but its magic remained, and a new, mysterious chapter of her life was just beginning. Thank you so much for watching. What do you think happened to Emily? Let me know your theories in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell so you don't miss the next one. See you in the next video.